Chapter 731 Withdraw your troops. Your Majesty, I've already seized Filren. The new king of Filren, Byron, was so terrified that he fled. Likewise, I've defeated Filren's troops until they're nothing but scraps. It's a perfect opportunity for us to take over the country. They're no longer a threat to me, said Caspian. I understand you guys feel fired up and invincible now, but you're not in Diaturanian territory. If I supply you with millions of soldiers, how will all of you survive if something goes wrong? Balthazar rebuked. I've already considered this, Your Majesty. You needn't worry about sending more soldiers now that we've claimed Filren's capital, Caspian answered. What? Are you planning to disobey my orders, or do you think my ability to judge the situation is inferior to yours? Balthazar thundered. Upon sensing the former's seething tone, Caspian quickly explained himself. I can't possibly compare myself to your almighty presence, Your Majesty. However, you're far away in your royal residence, making you less aware of the situation here. Caspian, Balthazar growled. You're still young and reckless. I can't allow millions of soldiers to risk their lives alongside you. I've brought out the royal scepter to summon your return to Dord City officially. Yet you haven't done so. Do you plan to disobey me till the very end? I wouldn't dare disobey your orders with my humble status. I merely can't withdraw myself from this war. Besides, everything I do is for Diatoran. If I withdraw now, wouldn't the sacrifices of our fallen soldiers be in vain? Caspian tried to reason with Balthazar. Since you claim to be willing to obey me, I want you to withdraw your troops now. Your Majesty, withdrawing now would only cause us grave losses. Not to mention, our current campaign won't be as successful, Caspian explained. That's enough from you. Quit spewing nonsense. I've considered every aspect of the situation better than you. You're to bring your subordinates back now. Should you continue to resist my commands, I'll declare you a rebel. Balthazar unequivocally brushed the former off. Yes, Your Majesty. Caspian had no choice but to nod upon facing Balthazar's unwavering resolve. He couldn't bear the consequences if he persisted and got branded as a rebel. Little did he know Jerry had instructed Balthazar to say all those things. That was why Balthazar spoke differently than before. Caspian found it odd, but it never crossed his mind that Balthazar would be under a spell. After all, most people found witchcraft unbelievable. Caspian's expression darkened once the phone call ended. What did the king say, Lord Caspian? Sylvia asked. He's determined to have me withdraw, Caspian helplessly said. Sylvia was dubious. His Majesty was eager to deploy our troops back then, yet he's now asking us to withdraw? That's too odd. Even Macy was displeased. Indeed, His Majesty's behaving strangely. It was challenging enough to claim Filren's capital. But all our efforts will be wasted now. What is His Majesty thinking? There was an assassination attempt on His Majesty last night. Now, he's in such a rush that he used the royal scepter to issue an official order making me withdraw. Something beyond our knowledge must have happened, Caspian stated. What do you mean, Lord Caspian? Asked a confused Macy. Caspian shook his head. I can't quite explain what's going on either. I just have some suspicions. Should we withdraw then? Macy asked. The king is already furious. If we don't, he'll declare my insubordination as traitorous behavior. I can't do anything about this. Although Caspian didn't want to withdraw, he had no choice. Sorrow struck Sylvia, Macy, and the others when they heard that. Caspian suffered the most. He sighed deeply and exclaimed, Millions of our soldiers fought hard to get us this far. Alas, it seems like their efforts will all be in vain. He had never experienced such a dilemma before. Even when enemies surrounded Diatoran before, Caspian had never been in such a difficult position. His soldiers had sacrificed their lives, and they'd given their everything to capture the capital of Filren. All of that was for naught because they now had to withdraw. They would undoubtedly defeat Filren for good if they stayed. Sadly, everything was about to crumble to nothing. Lord Caspian, we don't want to witness such a miserable outcome either. However, His Majesty has already given official orders. We can't defy him, Macy consoled Caspian. Yeah. We're only withdrawing for now. We'll be eventually back, Sylvia chimed in. Lord Caspian, we're already victorious. Filren wouldn't dare harbor any ill intent toward us anymore. They'll take our current battle as a lesson, Yura explained. Immediately after that, Sylvia and Macy began issuing orders to withdraw. The armored soldiers and Phoenix Vanguard were guarding the city. They were confused when they received that order. Regardless, they obeyed and evacuated Filren's capital in an orderly fashion. At that point, Filren's reinforcement troops had fled near the capital. Caspian didn't plan on avoiding these people. He instructed his soldiers to beat up Filren's troops. His soldiers had to beat those troops to pulps even if they were retreating. The reinforcement troops that fled back to the capital never thought Caspian's army would withdraw. They were already afraid of getting beaten up, so they didn't have the will to keep fighting. "Everyone, charge! Defeat every one of these people!" Caspian instantly ordered. The armored soldiers and Phoenix vanguard fired right away. Those fleeing enemy troops were already terrified after getting beaten up. They didn't dare continue the fight, so they fled in all directions and didn't plan on fighting back. At that point, Caspian no longer asked his subordinates to chase after the enemy troops. His army needed to return to Diatoran as soon as possible. So, he led the armored soldiers, Phoenix vanguard, and the million elite soldiers away. Many were shocked at Caspian's sudden withdrawal despite staking claim over Filren's capital. No one knew why Balthazar would give such orders. Even the Filrenians were confused. Byron had long escaped. He sighed deeply in relief once he learned Caspian's troops had withdrawn. Byron assumed Filton was doomed, but he never imagined Caspian would withdraw then. Many of Filren's higher-ups felt they should deploy that troop to pursue Caspian's army at this moment. Even so, Byron wasn't confident and feared it was a trap. He found the entire thing odd, so he dared not act recklessly. The other war gods of Diatoran were also baffled when they heard about Balthazar's orders. They were all war gods and knew the situation was ideal. They felt Caspian should have continued attacking. His sudden withdrawal would undoubtedly lower their soldiers' morale. The four other war gods wanted to ask Balthazar why he made Caspian withdraw at such a crucial moment. After all, Balthazar agreed to battle Filren during their first strategy meeting. His actions now were oddly contradictory. Each of the war gods received almost identical replies from Balthazar. Since Balthazar was under Jerry's control, he dodged the four war gods' questions. He insisted on Caspian's withdrawal without explaining why. The war gods couldn't fathom why he'd do that. Caspian soon returned to the West Eredlands war zone with his troops. Chapter 732. Something feels off. At the king's residence, Kelvin said urgently, "Dad, Caspian's return to Diatoran with his million elite soldiers is detrimental to us." "What's wrong?" Jerry asked. "We were planning to depose Caspian, but he has so many troops under his command now. What do we do if he decides to start a rebellion?" Kelvin's voice tremored with concern. "That's right. Only around 100,000 of the million elite soldiers are Caspian subordinates. Besides, there aren't any guards at the king's residence. Plus, Caspian is the famous Diatoranian god of war. We're no match for him at all if things escalate into a confrontation." Zane joined in. Only then did Jerry realize the gravity of things, and he nodded. "You guys are right. We can't let Caspian bring his army into Dord City. Yeah, especially not the armored soldiers and Phoenix vanguard. Caspian trained them himself. If he rebels, they'll undoubtedly take his side," Zane stated. "Even if Caspian doesn't rebel, he might act rashly if we try to depose him. It'll be dangerous if that happens." Kelvin also voiced his innermost thoughts. "I understand. I'll have Balthazar call Caspian right away." Jerry went to Balthazar immediately after saying that. He wanted the latter to give an official order to Caspian. Having spoken with Jerry, Balthazar soon made another call to Caspian. Caspian dared not ignore Balthazar's call when he saw it. He answered immediately and asked, "Your Majesty, how can I be of service?" "Things at the border aren't too stable now, Lord Caspian. Station the million elite troops and armored soldiers at West Eredlands. As for you, come to Dord City without any troops. Just travel light," said Balthazar. "Yes, Your Majesty," Caspian answered. He never intended to bring his armored soldiers back to Dord City in the first place. After all, it was inconvenient to travel around with his subordinates. Besides, the troops from West Eredlands naturally had to stand guard there. Caspian saw no reason to take them to Dord City. Sylvia approached Caspian after the latter ended the call. "Lord Caspian, has the king given you any new orders? He's asked me to go to Dord City without any troops. The armored soldiers must remain at West Eredlands in case of a sneak attack from enemy troops," Caspian replied. "Lord Caspian, something feels off about His Majesty this time. Won't it be risky if you go to Dord City alone?" Sylvia questioned. "There's nothing to fear. I can only accept my fate if the king wants to dispose of me. The outcome will be the same, regardless of whether I bring the troops there." Caspian was unwaveringly confident. Sylvia nodded. "You're right, Lord Caspian. Let's hope I'm merely overthinking things. I can't help feeling like something's wrong, Lord Caspian. Why don't you bring a few subordinates with you?" I fear something might actually happen, Macy murmured. Don't worry, you guys. I know His Majesty well. We may have clashing opinions, but he won't do anything to me, Caspian assured them. He knew Balthazar wouldn't punish him because he had contributed significantly to Diatoran. The king may not do anything to you. Still, I'm worried someone with ill intent might lie to His Majesty and convince him to punish you, Macy insisted. But His Majesty has already given official orders that I shouldn't bring any troops back to Dord City with me. If I do otherwise, someone will surely say I'm rebelling. Caspian shrugged helplessly. Still, Macy persisted. Lord Caspian, please let me and Phoenix Vanguard escort you to Dord City. At the very least, we can ensure your safety. All right, the king only said to station the armored soldiers at West Eredlands. I wouldn't be disobeying his orders if I brought Phoenix Vanguard with me. Caspian caved in. Thank you, Lord Caspian. Macy was over the moon. She didn't think Caspian would agree to her request without a fight. There's no need for such formalities. You're Diatoran's hero now for successfully completing the assassination task. His Majesty will unquestionably reward you for it, said a smiling Caspian. I was only doing what I had to. It doesn't matter whether I get rewarded. I only hope the king will forgive your defiance. Macy had just said that when she recalled something and asked, Oh, right. How's Lena? Is she safe now? Lena has gone into hiding. She can return to Diatoran after some time, Caspian answered. Lena and I executed the assassination, yet she was able to escape unharmed while I became the enemy's prisoner, and even needed you to rescue me in person. It seems there's still a difference between our skills. Don't say that, you're both heroes. Lena has always carried out assassinations, so she's more accustomed to such situations. As for you, this was considered your first time. The fact that you completed the task is good enough. I think you're incredible, Caspian reassured her. Macy's heart fluttered when she heard that. She couldn't believe Caspian would praise her. That was when Sylvia stepped forward. Allow me to also return to Dord City with you, Lord Caspian. After a brief and shocked pause, Caspian replied, Why would you return with me? The armored battalion needs someone to oversee them. You should remain in West Eredlands. I worry things might escalate in Dord City. The situation feels too unusual. Sylvia explained. Caspian nodded since he had also gotten used to having Sylvia by his side. Okay then? The king didn't say that I had to return alone. Since you've also served your country well this time, you should join me in returning. There's no telling if His Majesty might reward both of you. I've never considered getting a reward. I'm more concerned with finding out why His Majesty is behaving so weirdly, Sylvia declared. Let's discuss that after we return to Dord City. For now, let's have the 1,000,000 elite and armored soldiers guard this place, Caspian ordered. Understood, Sylvia and the others replied. After making the arrangements, Sylvia and Macy led 2,000 members of Phoenix Vanguard to escort Caspian back to Dord City. The civilians of Dord City lined up to welcome Macy once they learned she was returning. She was now a hero in their hearts since she had assassinated Camden. They felt such a feat was worth celebrating. They also welcomed Caspian, the Diatoranian god of war, and Sylvia, a general officer. Caspian, Sylvia, Macy, and the Phoenix Vanguard members walked down the streets of Dord City. While they did so, many civilians came out to greet them. It was the first time such a scene and atmosphere occurred in Diatoran. Even celebrities couldn't compare to the group. Caspian and the others were soldiers with unyielding strength and will. They were the real celebrities. In their current campaign, Caspian was invincible and seized Filren's capital. He might not have defeated Filren, but the battle demonstrated Diatoran's immense vigor. Caspian was the chief commander and the biggest contributor in that battle. Sylvia and the others had also contributed. As for Macy, there was no need to say more. Everyone knew she had assassinated Camden. Thus, they admired her from the bottom of their hearts. All of Diatoran now saw Macy as a superstar. Macy was slightly exhilarated. It was her first time receiving such overwhelming support. Before today, she never would have dreamed such a scene would ensue. Chapter 733. An enraged Balthazar. The Andrews family was restless back at the king's residence. They learned Caspian had brought Sylvia and the others back to Dord City. They were uneasy after finding out many civilians adored Caspian and his subordinates. An anxious Zane voiced, Dad, Caspian has made incredible achievements. Also, thousands of people respect him now. Won't Diatoran descend into chaos if we depose him? Yeah, Dad. The civilians of Dord City have warmly welcomed Caspian home after learning about his triumph. Such a scene has never happened before. Isn't it unwise if we take him down now? Kelvin joined in. What's there to be afraid of? We don't need to worry about those regular civilians. After all, our positions are at risk the longer we keep Caspian around. Have Skyark Palace prepare everything. If Caspian and his subordinates dare defy us, they'll be punished on the spot. Jerry barked. Got it, Dad. We also can't let Phoenix Vanguard enter the king's residence. Otherwise, it'll be a pain to deal with them, Zane advised. Jerry agreed. Indeed, and we can't let them bring any weapons too. I'll give the orders to block off and search for weapons on Caspian and his entourage, Kevin responded. Do it right away. We can make them disappear forever as long as they enter the king's residence with anything suspicious, Jerry snarled. On it. Zane and Kelvin did as told. Before they could leave, Jerry added, It's best to have a witness if we want to depose Caspian. Summon the higher-ups over in the king's name. But Dad, Kelvin asked, what do we do if the higher-ups take Caspian's side? Jerry replied calmly, We control the king now, so what's there to worry about? It doesn't matter what the higher-ups say, they must comply with whatever the king orders. Also bring Lyndon over, otherwise Caspian might be onto us. Got it, Kelvin nodded. Then, he and Zane headed off. Lyndon had recovered under the treatment of the Skyark Palace's doctors. The leader of 3 Poisons Hall, Jethro, controlled Lyndon's thoughts. He made the latter lead some of Skyark Palace's soldiers as he patrolled the king's residence. To prevent unwanted accidents, the soldiers carried weapons and guns. They were ready to attack Caspian and his entourage at any moment. Meanwhile, the Dord city's higher-ups rushed to the king's residence once they heard Balthazar wanted to see them. Balthazar sat on the elevated throne in the massive hall. Around him were Skyark Palace's elites, who pretended to be regular guards. Caspian, Sylvia, Macy, and the 2,000 Phoenix Vanguard members soon arrived outside the residence. They were about to enter when the guards stopped them. Halt! The guards thundered. Caspian and the others were baffled. Eventually, a frustrated Sylvia spoke up. You shit for brains? Don't you guys know who this is? He's the Diateranian god of war. How dare you stop him from entering? The king has given orders that large groups of people aren't allowed to enter, the guard stated. These people are Lord Caspian's personal guards. Why can't they enter? Sylvia questioned. The guard responded, There are already many higher-ups inside the king's residence. There isn't enough room for more people. It's an order from His Majesty. Sylvia wanted to snap at the guard, but Caspian raised his hand, motioning her not to argue any further. Caspian instructed the group, Phoenix Vanguard will wait out here. Yes, Lord Caspian. The Phoenix Vanguard members spoke in unison. After making the appropriate arrangements, Caspian, Sylvia, and Macy entered the king's residence. Yet, the guard called out to them again, Wait right there! Who gave you the permission to yell at us, you shithead? What else do you want? Sylvia growled with impatience. His Majesty has also instructed that weapons aren't allowed inside, the guard said. She and I can leave our weapons behind, but Lord Caspian has special rights. His Majesty allowed Lord Caspian to bring weapons into his residence. Sylvia fought back. His Majesty gave new orders to hold everyone to the same rule. Nobody can bring weapons inside today. The guard refused to budge. Sylvia and Macy found the situation odd as it was their first time encountering this. Lord Caspian, something's off today. His Majesty has never given such orders before. Could it be that something actually happened? Macy asked. No. His Majesty experienced a near assassination attempt last night, so it makes sense that he's being careful now, Caspian rationalized. Lord Caspian Macy wanted to convey more of her concerns to Caspian. However, the latter raised his hand to stop her from speaking. Caspian entrusted a member of Phoenix Vanguard to look after his diatanium dagger. Immediately after, he brought Macy and Sylvia inside. They had just entered when they noticed the heavily armed guards all over the place. He saw the Andrews family and many higher-ups waiting inside the main hall of the residence once he approached it. Balthazar sat high up on the throne without a hint of emotion on his face. The atmosphere felt odd. The Andrews family became uneasy when Caspian approached. That was because Caspian was the invincible Diateranian god of war. Even without subordinates, his presence was enough to send chills down one's spine. Everyone was nervous Caspian would notice something was amiss. They'd be dead meat if he caught on to what they were doing. A deadly silence filled the entire hall. Only the sounds of Caspian's, Sylvia's, and Macy's footsteps rang out. The higher-ups were also a bundle of nerves. Even they could sense something was off. They just couldn't put their finger on what was wrong. Your Majesty, said Caspian, Sylvia, and Macy. At the same time, he bowed while the other two curtsied. Jerry started murmuring again to control Balthazar's every action. "You may rise," said Balthazar. "Thank you, your majesty," said the three as they resumed their usual stance. "Lord Caspian, I officially summoned your return to Diatoren with my royal scepter." "Why did you defy me?" Balthazar interrogated, his brows scrunching into a stern expression. "Your majesty, we were on a roll and won several consecutive battles. Plus, I conquered Filren's capital. We could have taken over all of Filren. Withdrawing our troops meant all our efforts would be in vain," Caspian explained. "How arrogant! You're underestimating Filren. They were merely careless at that moment and couldn't make the right move. They'll attack you and your soldiers once they regain their footing. When that happens, your soldiers will be at risk because you made the wrong choice," Balthazar bellowed. Sylvia, Macy, and the higher-ups tensed in shock when they saw Balthazar so enraged. Caspian was the head of the 5 war gods. He had achieved many outstanding military feats for Diatoren. Not to mention, he had saved Balthazar's life many times. Balthazar had always been friendly with Caspian. Such a situation was the first in history. The worst part? Balthazar didn't praise Caspian for being victorious in battle. Instead, he criticized the latter. That was unbelievable. Even Caspian felt alarmed by the state of things. He felt Balthazar was different than usual today. Chapter 734. Caspian got deposed. "Caspian, you've become so arrogant that you're not taking me seriously. You even dare to defy me in front of all these higher-ups. I'm dismissing you from your post today. From now on, you're no longer a god of war of Diatoren," Balthazar barked. Apart from the Andrews family, everyone was in shock, and never would have imagined Balthazar would depose Caspian. "Your Majesty, Lord Caspian is a commendable hero of Diatoren. Yes, he defied your order this once. But it's not that serious of a crime that warrants this." One of the higher-ups stepped forward to speak up on Caspian's behalf. Another higher-up stepped forward. "Yeah, Your Majesty, Lord Caspian may have disobeyed you, but he was only doing it for the greater good of Diatoren. He wanted to contribute to our Diatoren's grand cause. That's all. Don't bother defending Caspian anymore. He blatantly disobeyed my orders. If I don't punish him strictly and accordingly, others may disobey my orders too. What power would I, the king, have when that happens?" Balthazar questioned frostily. That was when Sylvia spoke. "Hasn't Lord Caspian withdrawn with his soldiers from battle as you ordered him to?" "It's too late. Caspian didn't withdraw immediately after receiving my orders, which means he defied me. I'm merciful enough for not giving him a death sentence." Jerry had always served by Balthazar's side, so he knew the latter's behavior and speech well. So, although he made Balthazar say appalling words, they were still reasonable. Another higher-up spoke up then. "Your Majesty, Lord Caspian has achieved great things during his campaign. Many of our soldiers might be upset if we depose him." "Yes, Caspian has emerged victorious, but it's by pure luck. Given his character, he mustn't be allowed to lead troops into battle again. Otherwise, things might eventually go south," Balthazar boomed. The higher-ups no longer dared to speak up for Caspian. They shut their lips because they sensed the menacing presence of the guards around the hall. It was like the guards were ready to take someone down at any moment. Yet one higher-up persisted. "Your Majesty, Lord Caspian is strategic and won battles thousands of miles away. He's a prodigy who can lead troops in a war. The other 4 war gods can't compare to him. It'll be a massive loss to Diatoren if you dismiss Lord Caspian now." "Who says the other 4 can't compare to Caspian? Diatoren possesses many other talented individuals. We can grow stronger even without Caspian," Balthazar refuted. The other higher-ups were afraid to defend Caspian. They saw how determined Balthazar was and could tell he was enraged. They'd likely be in trouble if they kept butting heads with Balthazar. These higher-ups were intelligent and could tell Caspian had pissed Balthazar off badly this time. Sylvia had accompanied Caspian through every life experience. She saw how things worsened and instantly stepped up to plead on Caspian's behalf. "Your Majesty, Lord Caspian has always been loyal to you. Please reconsider this. Caspian has defied my orders several times. He's still as young and reckless as before. A person like this isn't worthy of being the Diatoranian god of war. But, Your Majesty, you're the one who proposed this campaign. Lord Caspian kept disapproving of dispatching troops before. How can you say he's young and reckless now?" Sylvia fought back. Jerry fell briefly silent when he heard that. Sylvia was right. Balthazar had suggested dispatching troops for this campaign. So, it didn't make sense that Balthazar called Caspian young and reckless. Jerry got caught off guard. Thus Balthazar, whom he controlled, didn't know how to respond either. Yes, I insisted on dispatching the troops. Yet I never allowed Caspian to lead the soldiers into a risky situation. I learned that Caspian had infiltrated deep into Filren, so I ordered him to retreat right away. Who'd have known Caspian would dare disobey me? Who'll be responsible if his Milan elite soldiers die because he was late to retreat? Soldiers must obey orders. If everyone defies me like Caspian, how will I have authority over others in the future? Jerry made Balthazar say these words. Your Majesty, Lord Caspian is the head of the 5 war gods. Not to mention, he's saved you from grave danger many times. Deposing him would only make the enemies rejoice. Who'll defend us if enemy troops invade us again? Sylvia urged. I still have 4 other war gods. Each of them is a brave and skilled fighter. Who says our country can't fend against invaders? Balthazar was stubborn. That was when Macy stepped up. Your Majesty, Lord Caspian's the head of the 5 war gods, so the other 4 can't possibly compare to him. They couldn't do anything when enemies surrounded Diatoran. In the end, it was Lord Caspian who resolved the problem. Please allow Lord Caspian to keep his position on account of his past military achievements. Macy, you're nothing more than Phoenix Vanguard's leader. How is it your place to order me around? Balthazar fumed. Your Majesty, Macy contributed significantly to the current war. She assassinated Camden, the former king of Filren, which is a big deal. Sylvia snapped. Jerry made Balthazar bellow. Enough with your nonsense. I've already decided to remove Caspian from his post. If anyone dares beg for mercy on his behalf, they'll be punished severely. In truth, Jerry's mind was a mess at that moment. He could order Skyark Palace's guards to act if Caspian, Sylvia, and the others resisted. However, he preferred not to have that happen. After all, others would grow suspicious if Caspian, Sylvia, and Macy got killed. He planned to strip Caspian's military authority before slowly dealing with Caspian. Caspian had many enemies, so nobody would suspect people from the Skyark Palace for killing him. That was when Caspian, who hadn't spoken in a long time, parted his lips. Everyone, please stop. I'm willing to accept my punishment. Sylvia, Macy, and the others present were in sheer shock. They couldn't believe Caspian hadn't explained himself to Balthazar. Caspian was the Diaturanian god of war. How could he accept this? Little did they know Caspian hadn't said anything, because he had long noticed an unusually murderous energy in the space. He also sensed how the guards didn't act like they used to. They gave off an intensely violent energy, and their presence was noticeable. Not to mention, they looked like martial arts fighters. Among everyone there, the person behaving the weirdest was Balthazar. He acted like a stoic statue and spoke emotionlessly. Caspian planned to find out the truth behind everything gradually. Lord Caspian, Sylvia and Macy were both anxious. It was shocking to them that Caspian didn't bother clearing his name. Caspian replied blandly, I'm no longer your lord. Be sure to fulfill your duties well in the future. Jerry was overjoyed upon seeing Caspian willingly accept the deposition. Since you have no objections, hand over the troops under your military authority and leave Dord City, Balthazar stated. Chapter 735 Your next move. Thank you for your time, Your Majesty. I'll take my leave then. Caspian bowed slightly without appearing fazed. Then, he turned to stroll out of the place. It wasn't his first time experiencing such a situation. He knew whatever belonged to him would eventually return to him. The higher-ups of Dord City naturally didn't want anything more to do with Caspian after seeing him get punished. Sylvia and Macy watched Caspian leave. Then, they excused themselves from Balthazar's presence. Your Majesty, I'll take my leave now. Sylvia curtsied. Macy did the same. I'll head off too, Your Majesty. Jerry felt like his plan was close to succeeding. Now that Caspian was deposed, he couldn't care less about Macy and Sylvia. So he made the emotionless Balthazar say, All right, you two may leave, but you must resume your duties after departing. Jerry had said that to ensure the two wouldn't chase after Caspian. He especially didn't want Sylvia, who was always beside Caspian, to do so. Yes, Your Majesty. Sylvia and Macy nodded before hurrying out of the residence. They headed after Caspian. They soon caught up to him. Sylvia nervously whispered urgently, Why didn't you clarify things, Lord Caspian? Macy gritted her teeth and snarled, Yeah, Lord Caspian. You allowed yourself to get misunderstood even though you've been a devoted and brave soldier. Even I feel it's unfair for you. Caspian glanced at the many guards outside the king's residence. Following that, he deliberately spoke aloud. Why are you guys still following me? I'm now a regular person. I'll behave now that the king has officially deposed me." Before Sylvia and Macy could speak, Caspian whispered, "Too many people are watching. Let's talk about it after we leave this place." Sylvia's and Macy's eyes widened as they understood what Caspian meant. The Phoenix Vanguard members waiting outside the residence were baffled to learn Caspian was deposed. However, they didn't know the details of what had happened inside. "I've always been by your side, Caspian. Can't we at least stay friends even if you've been removed from your post? Please let me escort you out." Sylvia hadn't called Caspian by his name in a long time, so she suddenly felt awkward about it. "Let me send you off too, Caspian." Macy spoke just then. She often called Caspian by his name when she previously went after him in West Eredlands. So, she was more used to it. The two had only said so to walk out with Caspian so they could know more about his future plans. They knew what happened today was too strange, and Balthazar wasn't being his usual self. "Sure." Caspian nodded without saying anything more. He wanted to give a few more instructions to Sylvia and Macy anyway. He could only reveal his intentions after leaving the residence and getting out of everyone's sight. "Let's move out, Phoenix Vanguard," Macy ordered her team at once. "Yes, Captain Osborne," the Phoenix Vanguard members replied unitedly. Then, Caspian entered an SUV while Macy took the driver's seat. Sylvia also got into the car. Sylvia only spoke up again after their car left the king's residence. "Lord Caspian, what's your next move? Are you okay with getting deposed like that?" Caspian let out a bitter chuckle before helplessly shaking his head at her. "So what if I'm not fine with it? The outcome will be the same no matter how I explain myself. The king is determined to depose me today. But the king used to respect you before. Why is he acting so strange today?" Sylvia was dubious. "I'm not sure what's going on yet, but I did notice some clues earlier," Caspian pointed out contemplatively. "Clues? What clues?" Sylvia asked. Caspian spoke with a neutral tone. "It seems you both should improve your attentiveness. Did you guys not notice how the guards were different from before?" Sylvia stiffened once she heard that, but she had seldom entered the king's residence. So she was unclear about how the guards appeared different from before. Even Macy was alarmed after hearing what Caspian said. Still, it was her first time in the king's residence, so she didn't realize anything was amiss either. Caspian was different. He often entered and exited the residence. Thus, he could tell the guards' temperament and skill levels were different than usual. The king's residence has switched out their guards. These new guards are traditional martial arts experts. There can only be one reason for it: someone's manipulating the king, Caspian deduced. "Who'd have the nerve to harbor ill intent toward the king?" Sylvia exclaimed in shock. "Who else would do this apart from Jerry? That sly old fox. He'd be the most overjoyed by it." Caspian chuckled. Sylvia's and Macy's jaws were wide open. Macy questioned, "How could Jerry have such an ability? He doesn't have power over any military troops." "That's also what confuses me. Jerry's a high-ranking official and doesn't have control over military troops. However, the guards at the residence were switched out. Maybe Jerry recruited them," Caspian stated. Macy was confused. "What about the previous guards at the king's residence? How could they ignore such a thing?" "They've probably been murdered," said Caspian. "The guards Jerry recruited aren't average people. They're traditional martial arts experts." Sylvia spoke up just then. "Now that you mention it, I did notice an intense murderous energy in the hall earlier, Lord Caspian. So, do you understand why I didn't explain myself earlier? If I resisted, His Majesty may be in danger. Plus, those guards would undoubtedly attack the three of us. Naturally, they can't harm me. However, I had to pretend to follow the flow since His Majesty was also there." "Jerry, that sly piece of shit, how dare he do such a thing?" Sylvia seethed. "I don't understand it. But why didn't the king inform us if he's in danger? We could have brought our soldiers in to rescue him," Macy pointed out. "I don't know either. I could have eliminated all those who plotted against him on the spot if he had given me the order. Yet, His Majesty did the unthinkable: he deposed me." Caspian shook his head. "Could it be that Jerry threatened the king into doing it?" Macy asked. "Most likely. His Majesty seemed emotionless earlier. It was like he had no soul and carried himself differently from before," Caspian answered. "But the king is mighty and all-powerful. How could Jerry possibly threaten him?" Macy didn't understand it. "Maybe we should investigate the situation first. Have Lena return at once to look further into the truth. We'll discuss the rest after," Caspian instructed them. Chapter 736: A Confusing Decision. "Yes, Lord Caspian. I'll contact Lena and have her return to the country at once," said Sylvia. That was when Caspian added, Lena has just assassinated Valerix. This period is crucial for her, so we must find a way to guarantee her safety. Nodding, Sylvia answered, I understand. I'll arrange everything, and ensure that Lena returns to the country in one piece. My biggest concern now is Jerry. He claimed he and some guards rushed over to eradicate the assassins that attacked the king. Even so, I can't help feeling like something's off with his story, Caspian remarked. Indeed, if the assassins were already killed, why would the king's residence's guards need changing? Sylvia chimed in. Unless Jerry's subordinates were the assassins. They killed the guards and threatened the king. Macy proposed a shocking deduction. It's possible. Caspian nodded. Macy paled. If that's so, this matter has become more terrifying than we thought. Oh, Sylvia exclaimed. So, the king was under Jerry's control. That explains why His Majesty forced us to withdraw even when we had the advantage and had seized Filren's capital. Caspian said, Jerry has been plotting this for some time. He deliberately waited until I left with all the soldiers before taking action. Lord Caspian, the king is in danger now that Jerry controls everything in there. We should hurry and gather up the other war gods to take down Jerry and rescue the king, Sylvia urged. Let's not rush. These are merely our assumptions, and we don't have any evidence. We might get accused of treason if we gather the other war gods now. Besides, I no longer have my position and can't mobilize troops. It's best to act after we investigate what happened. Yes, Lord Caspian. Then, Sylvia changed the topic. So, do you have any plans after this? I'm tired from all the recent battles. It'll be a perfect chance for me to go home, rest, and spend time with my wife and family, Caspian answered. That's true. You've been through a lot recently. You need to rest, Macy said, knowing it had been long since Caspian relaxed. The deposition conveniently gave him a chance to recharge and rest. Caspian, you and your wife have been married for a while, but you still don't have kids. Why don't you seize this chance to make a baby? Sylvia suggested. Macy's gaze dimmed when she heard that. Caspian didn't respond to Sylvia as he didn't want to discuss that matter. After all, everyone around him had been nagging at him to have kids. However, he did agree this was a good time to do it. He soon reminded the two, be sure to obey your superior's orders and not make mistakes. Otherwise, Jerry will never let you off the hook easily. Yes, Lord Caspian. The king has already told us to perform our usual duties. Sylvia responded. I feel like the king deliberately wanted to separate us from you. I can't put my finger on what he's up to. Macy shrugged. That must have been Jerry's intention. It has nothing to do with the king. Obey his orders then, Caspian commented. Immediately after, he snarled through gritted teeth, if Jerry actually rebels, I promise I'll end the Andrews family. Lord Caspian, we can't stay by your side anymore, so please keep yourself safe, Macy urged. Yeah. What if someone tries to assassinate you again? Sylvia was equally worried. She had always been by Caspian's side, so it felt odd to leave him now. Relax. Do you guys think I'm a coward? Caspian remained stoic. Their car arrived at the airport after half an hour. Sylvia and the others were reluctant to see Caspian leave as he climbed into a fighter jet. Technically, Caspian was no longer the Diaturanian god of war, so he had no right to sit in a fighter jet. However, the news had yet to spread. Everyone assumed Caspian was still the Diaturanian god of war and treated him with the utmost respect. Caspian got into the fighter jet and headed for South Lake City. By then, Sylvia and Macy began taking action. Back at the king's residence, the Andrews family and the higher-ups still remained in the hall. Your Majesty, we should formally announce that Caspian is no longer the Diaturanian god of war, Jerry suggested. After saying that, he controlled Balthazar and made the latter speak in the same emotionless manner. You're right, Mr. Andrews. We must inform everyone about this. Have all media companies cover this news. What a brilliant idea, Your Majesty, said many higher-ups. Immediately after that, Jerry made Balthazar promote his position. Balthazar announced, You did well rescuing me last night, Mr. Andrews. Because of that, I've decided to appoint you as my trusted advisor from now on. You will assist me in managing all affairs of our country. Everyone was dumbfounded once they heard that. The trusted advisor position was second only to the king of Diatoran. It had always been vacant up until now. Nobody would have imagined Balthazar would bestow Jerry with this position. Jerry waved off his hands. That won't do, Your Majesty. How can a humble staff like me be your trusted advisor? You should entrust someone else with this position instead. Mr. Andrews, you've always been devoted and given your all to Diatoran. You're the only person worthy of this position. "So please stop being so modest," replied Balthazar. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll do my best to assist you. The recent war has worn me out mentally and physically. I intend to take a break for a while. Mr. Andrews will handle everything during my absence. Everyone is to obey his orders," Balthazar declared. Jerry had made Balthazar say those things because he wanted to give himself more authority. "Yes, Your Majesty," the many higher-ups answered. Then, Jerry made Balthazar bestow official positions to both Kelvin and Zane. All the higher-ups could finally tell what was going on, and knew Dord City would be a mess. The Andrews family were now high-ranking officials. Kelvin and Zane respectively became the commander of the Royal Guard and chief inspector. No other family was as powerful as the Andrewses now. "Have someone announce this new information to the public at once," said Balthazar. Everyone nodded before congratulating the Andrews family. Given their powerful status now, nobody dared to cross them. As for the Andrews famine, the entire thing felt like a dream. They never imagined things would go this smoothly. At that point, they controlled everything. Jerry could order the guards to deal with whoever dared disgrace with or challenge his family. He wasn't stupid enough to overthrow Balthazar then and there. After all, that would surely attract suspicion. Still, Jerry believed the throne would eventually become his. Chapter 737 Explosive News. News of Caspian's deposition had already spread like wildfire by the time he arrived at South Lake City. The entirety of Diatoran already knew he had been dismissed from his post as the god of war because he had disobeyed Balthazar's orders. Even other nations knew about this. No one had ever thought the Diatoranian god of war would meet his downfall like this. No one knew why the king of Diatoran had dismissed Caspian either. Caspian was a capable man. He had pulled Diatoran back from the brink. Who would protect Diatoran with Caspian gone? Estria, Filren, Vedetia, and Astronia were excited about this development. Meanwhile, Tigra's king regretted it instead. He wouldn't have kneeled to Diatoran had he known that Caspian had been dismissed from his position. Byron felt like a burden had been lifted from his soldiers. Caspian might have attacked Filren if he still held his post. The International Alliance also breathed a sigh of relief at this news. Caspian's might was terrifying beyond belief. He was the stuff of nightmares. The remaining war gods were perplexed by Caspian's dismissal. They couldn't understand why Balthazar would make such a baffling decision. Meanwhile, the Stuarts were overjoyed when they learned that Caspian was no longer a war god. Caspian used to be part of their family as their son-in-law, but he hadn't helped the Stuarts at all. He even put Henry to death. They were delighted by his lack of position. Now, they could take the opportunity to get their revenge on him. Willow, Sherry, and Zoe couldn't accept the news. Caspian was an exceptional man, the one known as the Diatoranian god of war. However, he was dismissed all because he hadn't followed Balthazar's orders. This was far too heavy a punishment. This can't be real, right? Didn't His Majesty favor Caspian? Why would he suddenly dismiss him? Willow still couldn't believe her ears. Willow, Diatoran has officially stated this. Many news outlets have also reported on Caspian's dismissal. "It's real," Zoe said. But Caspian won battle after battle for Diatoran. He even saved His Majesty too. Did they dismiss him over such a minor transgression? Willow couldn't process it. From what the news reports say, he was dismissed due to disobeying the king's orders. His Majesty's word is law, after all. Who would go against it? Zoe said back. But it's still a good thing that he got dismissed. He can now spend more time recuperating at home. I was so worried when he was constantly out on the battlefront, Sherry piped up. Mom, people are bound to look down on Caspian due to his sudden dismissal, just like when they used to laugh at him for being a loser. I don't want to relive that. And besides, Caspian now has many enemies. What if they come looking for revenge? Willow asked. But what's done is done. We can't change the king's mind, Sherry said helplessly. What a sudden 180! Who would have thought that Caspian would suddenly become a regular citizen once more after all his feats? Zoe lamented. That's the danger of joining the military or politics. You have to watch your every step. Make one wrong move, and you're done for, Sherry said. But I don't think Caspian did anything wrong. He had already occupied Filren's capital. Was there anything wrong with continuing the assault? His Majesty was the odd one instead. Why did he order Caspian to retreat? Willow retorted. He didn't do anything wrong. But going against Bydisri's orders was not something he should have done, Sherry said. Despite his sudden dismissal, Caspian still received an overwhelming welcome upon his arrival at South Lake City. The residents treated him like he was still the Diatoranian god of war. There was even a limousine just to pick him up. Caspian didn't refuse their welcome. When Caspian returned to Riverside Villa, the armored soldiers still treated him the same. "I'm no longer a war god, you should go back. You don't have to stay here anymore," Caspian said as he dismissed them with a wave. "But you're still the Diaturanian god of war to us. We won't be going anywhere. We shall remain here by your side to protect you," the armored soldier stated. "There's no point. Soon there will be an official order telling you to leave this place." Caspian shook his head before walking past the gate. Upon hearing the noise outside, Willow, Sherry, and Zoe emerged from the villa. "Caspian, is that you?" Willow's feelings were complicated as she looked at him. She didn't know how to comfort Caspian. He must have felt awful. "It's good to see you back. Come in. I'll get you a nice cup of coffee," Willow said through a strained smile. "Sure." Caspian nodded. He knew his family must have already known about his sudden dismissal. They must have a lot of questions for him. "Now that you're back, you should take a good long break," Sherry said. She didn't bring up Caspian's dismissal. "You're right, I can take a break now. I'll have more time to spend with everyone now," Caspian agreed. "Do you have any plans, honey?" Willow asked. "Nothing, really," Caspian answered simply. He couldn't possibly announce his plans to take on Jerry to her. "I'll always support you regardless of your choice," Willow declared. "I'm tired. I want to take it easy," Caspian said as he sat on the couch and propped a leg up on his knee. "No, you can't. Are you going to just give up and wither away? Have you forgotten when everyone jeered at you?" Willow reminded him. "She's right. You can take a break for a few days, but you have to pull yourself together. You still have your skills. I'm sure you'll do great in anything you choose." Sherry was worried for her son. "All right, let's drop this for the time being. Please give me some space," Caspian said while he dismissed them with a wave of his hand. The Andrews' sudden promotion turned many heads. Everyone was surprised that they would be promoted to such high positions. Jerry was now a trusted advisor to Balthazar, and Kelvin was now the commander of the Royal Guard. This development raised many eyebrows. Even the remaining war gods were taken aback. Why would Balthazar favor the Andrews family? They had done nothing to deserve the promotions. But this piece of news was an exciting one for the other nations. They thought Balthazar a fool for making such a decision. If this continued, Diatoran was bound to fall. Chapter 738. The Andrews family got carried away. "Caspian, how did you get dismissed while the Andrewses got promoted? It just seems off," Willow said. "You shouldn't pay too much attention to rumors about royal workings. You probably wouldn't understand even if I were to explain," Caspian said. "All right then. You said you'd help me rebuild Southlake Corporation, but that seems to be impossible now. And Miranda and the others are now unemployed." Willow trailed off, her expression downcast. "Don't worry, darling. I keep my promises," Caspian assured. "But you lost everything. How can you fulfill that promise?" Willow asked. "You'll find out in the future. I have some time on my hands now, so come with me to the hospital. Let's visit Tom and Arya," Caspian suggested. "All right." Caspian then left the residence with Willow and Sherry. They had just exited the villa when the head of the armored soldiers received a new order. The soldiers were to leave Riverside Villa. With Caspian's removal from his post, he no longer had the right to be guarded by them. Jerry was the one behind this arrangement. He had to eliminate every obstacle if he wanted to take on Caspian. Only then would he succeed in his goal. As Riverside Villa was Caspian's own property, Jerry had no way of confiscating it. "Lord Caspian, Mr. Andrews just gave us the order to leave the residence," the commander of the armored soldiers said. He felt helpless. "Follow his orders and leave then, you have to do so. I'm no longer a war god and I don't need you to protect me," Caspian said. "You will always be, Lord Caspian, the Diaturanian god of war, to us. We want to follow you till the end," the commander declared. The rest of the armored soldiers chimed in as well. They also wanted to stay with Caspian. They didn't want to leave. "If you still think of me as a god of war, then listen to me. Leave this place right now. Your superiors will definitely punish you if you don't. So, take your men and leave," Caspian said. "Yes, Lord Caspian." All the commander could do was agree. "I already told you not to call me Lord Caspian. Go on now." "Take care, Lord Caspian," the armored soldiers' commander said. "Stop dragging things out and scram." Caspian might sound callous, but he was reluctant to see the armored soldiers go. He had trained them after all. He was somewhat attached to them. The armored soldiers then left the villa grounds. Willow couldn't help but tear up when she saw Caspian being forced to dismiss his former subordinates. After the armored soldiers left, Caspian and Willow drove to the hospital in a luxury car. Although Caspian no longer held the post of war god, the average person still couldn't attain his level of life. Jerry, Kelvin, and Zane couldn't hold back their joy when they returned home. After all those years of preparation, their plans were finally bearing fruit. The resident staff were ready to greet them when they arrived. "Congratulations on your positions," the staff called out. They were excited that Balthazar had given such high positions to Jerry and Kelvin. Now, no one in Diatoran could go against the Andrews family anymore. Jerry, Kelvin, and Zane went to the study. They couldn't let the lowly staff overhear their earlier conversation. "Now that we've been appointed to our positions, what should we do next, Dad?" Kelvin asked. "You're now the commander of the Royal Guard. You'll be in charge of recruiting more officers," Jerry said. "But where would I look for more men?" Kelvin asked, worried. "Don't you have brains? Don't we have plenty of Skyark Palace members? Now that the king is under our control, we can do anything we want. Our word goes," Jerry huffed. Kelvin realized that Jerry had a point. "That's right. I could just grab a few people from Skyark Palace to pretend to be royal guards." "Exactly. We have the king dancing in our palms anyway. You can just do whatever you want," Jerry affirmed. "What about me and my position as Inspector General? Do I need to recruit as well?" Zane asked. "Grab some Skyark Palace guys over. Then, gather intel and get rid of anyone who has any doubts about us. If you want to come out on top, you must be prepared to get your hands dirty and be brutal," Jerry declared. "Got it," Zane nodded. Now that Caspian has been dismissed, he no longer has any guards surrounding him. "Are we going to kill him?" Kelvin asked. "We're in no rush. Let Caspian enjoy a few more days of life," Jerry waved a hand dismissively. "But why?" "I think it's dangerous to let Caspian live," Kelvin said. "He has only just been removed from his position. If we kill him now, we'll be the main suspects. But he's a normal citizen now. We can take him out anytime we want," Jerry explained. "Point taken." Kelvin nodded. Jerry paused before continuing. "But that doesn't mean we can let our guard down. Caspian was the Diatoranian god of war for years. He's amassed a good amount of power and influence over the years, especially with the armored soldiers. We need to transfer them elsewhere and stop them from guarding him." "They're a force to be reckoned with, but where can we transfer them?" Kelvin asked. "Didn't Tigra say we may station our troops on their land? We can just send Caspian's armored soldiers there. That's two birds with one stone." Jerry chuckled. "That's great. Caspian won't have anyone by his side when we go after him. He won't be able to do anything," Zane said. Back in South Lake City, Caspian and the others finally arrived at the hospital. When they went to Tom and Arya's ward, they found Avon walking them through some rehabilitation exercises. Meanwhile, Miranda watched from the side. "Lord Caspian, when did you arrive?" Avon was taken aback by his presence. "I'm here to see Arya and Tom," Caspian said. Arya and Tom were also startled by Caspian's visit. They had also heard about his dismissal and weren't sure how to comfort him. "How are your injuries?" Caspian asked. "Dr. Long has been helping us with therapy for a while. We've almost made a full recovery," Tom answered. "You know how skilled a Dr. Avon is, Lord Caspian. We're bound to be all right as long as we have him. We'll be back on our feet soon," Arya said while smiling. "That's good." Caspian nodded. "By the way, what happened when you were in Dord City?" Avon asked curiously. "It's a long story." "At any rate, it's complicated," Caspian replied. "I think that the king has been completely hoodwinked. He must have listened to some little worm's lies to dismiss you like that. His Majesty is sure to ask you to return to your post one day," Avon declared. "Things will naturally work out. There's not much point worrying about the future now." Caspian eyed Tom in curiosity. "I heard from Miranda that you're part of Diatoran's rich list. Why did you make a career change and become a martial artist? Who exactly are you?" "Allow me to be honest, Lord Caspian. I'm actually a member of Greenton in West City," Tom clarified. Chapter 739, Plans in the Dark. "Greenton? Who exactly are they?" Caspian asked. He was familiar with a few gangs, but he didn't know much about Greenton. Willow and the others didn't know about Greenton either. They were a martial arts gang, and they were skilled in swordplay. "They were famous for that," Tom answered. "Is that so? I've never heard of them," Caspian said after a pause. "Why did you hide the fact that you're part of Greenton? Why did you come to South Lake City?" "They were wiped out overnight. All I could do was seek refuge with some distant relatives." "Oh? Just what enemies did Greenton have for them to meet such a cruel fate?" Caspian asked. "I've told Lena about Skyark Palace. I guess she didn't tell you about it." Tom hadn't intended to hide this from Caspian, so he proceeded to explain everything. Caspian and the others were shocked after hearing Tom's story. They hadn't expected Tom to have such a pitiful backstory. What an amazing life story. This is perfect material for my next book, Zoe exclaimed. Why did Lena fail to mention this? When she comes back, I'll have a word with her, Caspian snarled. I'm sure Captain Lena thought you were occupied, so she didn't tell you, Arya explained. By the time Lena caught wind of the situation with Skyark Palace, Caspian had already gone to Dord City, and by the time he ended his meeting there, Caspian had immediately assigned Macy and her to a mission. That was why Lena hadn't told him about Skyark Palace then. She wanted to investigate the situation before telling Caspian. Skyark Palace is quite the mysterious organization. Do you know who's behind them? Caspian asked. No idea, but I think they want to unify the martial arts world. Didn't the traditional martial arts association get decimated? It also seems that Skyark Palace popped out of nowhere, Tom pointed out. That's strange. Logically speaking, my intelligence network should have some information on them, Caspian said, puzzled. The person behind Skyark Palace is an enigma. It's already incredible that he recruited so many skilled martial artists. I heard that they have thousands of martial artists. With their numbers, no ordinary organization can go against them, Tom said. Caspian was suddenly reminded of the guards by Balthazar's side back at the king's residence. The presence they exuded could only belong to a martial artist. Caspian wondered if they had ties with Skyark Palace. He was only making a guess. He didn't know much about them, after all. Logically speaking, a martial artist shouldn't be involved with royalty. However, Caspian was sure of one thing. Something must have changed at the king's residence. He needed Lena back this instant so he could begin his investigation into the workings of the king's residence. Is the Black Moon that you spoke about that powerful? By the way, you must guard the Black Moon technique scroll well. Make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, Caspian said. Caspian knew what chaos awaited the world if such a powerful blade and technique were to come together. Understood. I've already hidden the Black Moon technique scroll away. No one but me knows where it is, Tom said. Caspian didn't continue to question him. The scroll belonged to Tom after all. As long as the Black Moon technique scroll didn't fall into Skyark Palace's hands, it was not his place to pry about it. Meanwhile, Caspian's mastery over the Eldorian scroll fragment had reached the next level. If he could get his hands on another fragment, he was sure he would reach new heights. Lord Caspian, Jerry was a regular official. Why did His Majesty suddenly pay such attention to him? It's just strange, Arya pointed out. Caspian was aware that Balthazar's behavior was odd. He wouldn't have made such a baffling move in the past and wouldn't take Jerry's words to heart. Caspian had no qualms about being dismissed as the god of war due to his king's orders. However, Jerry had done nothing and had no feat's name either. So, how did he get promoted to advisor? With so many people here, Caspian didn't continue discussing this topic. This is not the place to talk about this. It'll put us in danger, Caspian said. Arya nodded. She understood what Caspian meant. They would be in trouble if Jerry had spies here and leaked their conversation. I really do think that His Majesty will reappoint you one day, Lord Caspian, Avon insisted. That's right. You're a talent that only appears once every 100 years, Lord Caspian. Diatoran needs you, Arya said. We can talk about this another time. And stop calling me Lord Caspian. I'm no longer a war god, Caspian remarked. After some idle conversation, Caspian and the others left the hospital. After they arrived at Riverside Villa, Caspian dialed Sylvia's number. He told her to inform Macy and Lena to return as soon as possible. Once Lena received the orders, she immediately prepared to leave Estria. She already knew about the events that had unfolded in Diatoran the last few days. She needed to go back and help Caspian uncover the truth. Estria's security was tight due to the recent assassination of their king. Still, she braved the dangers and returned to Diatoran to help Caspian. Lena first donned a disguise before changing into plain clothes. With the travel documents she had prepared beforehand, she boarded a plane to a tiny nation by the Diatoranian border. There, she then traveled to Diatoran. This was how she evaded suspicion. Cecilia had begun studying at South Lake High. Caspian had decided to let her live in the school dormitories so she could focus on her studies. This would save her time from commuting. Meanwhile, Caspian and Willow were about to go to bed back at Riverside Villa. The atmosphere was a little different than usual as they sat inside their bedroom. The moon looks beautiful tonight, Willow suddenly said. It's been a while since we could just admire the moon as it is, Caspian exclaimed as he looked out the window. Life has its ups and downs. Sometimes, things just work out, and sometimes, they don't. Who knows? Maybe leaving the military is a blessing in disguise for you. Diatoren is currently surrounded by enemies. I'm still worried about this country. I'm not pleased with this, Caspian admitted. You already did your best and are loyal to your liege. But you still owe me many things, Willow said. When have I ever owed you anything? Caspian asked, not quite understanding. When was the last time we slept together? And also we keep saying that we want to add another member to our family. That still hasn't happened yet, Willow said, her pink lips parting. Chapter 740 The Ones Who Benefit the Most. Caspian also felt aroused when he heard Willow say that. However, that feeling soon disappeared. He had just been dismissed as the god of war, and there was also the precarious situation with the king's residence. Willow, I've just been removed from my post, and His Majesty is also currently surrounded by people who don't have his best interests at heart. I know you've been feeling down, but this is my way of getting you to relax. Willow grinned. I'm worried that Jerry will make a move on me, Caspian said, worried. But you're no longer involved with the military. Why would Jerry do anything to you? Willow asked, confused. Jerry has always considered me an eyesore. Now is the perfect time for him to strike since I no longer have any soldiers by my side. But Willow still didn't seem to get Caspian's words. I may have been stripped of my position, but I'm still a threat to Jerry. I used to be a Diatoranian god of war after all. If I wave a hand, there will be scores of people scrambling to support me. Jerry's not the kind of person who can stand to see someone turn their life around. He's sure to send people after me and raise hell, Caspian explained. Given the chance, Caspian would also strike when his opponent was at their weakest. Jerry is currently His Majesty's most trusted advisor, and he's also powerful. We no longer have the protection of the armored soldiers. What can you do if Jerry attacks? Willow frowned suddenly. As an advisor, he definitely can't openly make a move against me. He'll certainly get an assassin to kill me instead. Don't worry. The average assassin is no match for me, Caspian said casually. You're right, you're such an amazing man. That worm Jerry certainly can't touch you. Willow nodded rapidly. So, I want to improve myself quickly. Then I can handle everything thrown at me in the future, Caspian stated seriously. Alright, you do you. It's important to make sure that you stay alive. We can do this again some other time, Willow said. That's my thought as well. Now that Caspian's sleepiness had left him entirely, he headed to the river behind the villa. There he began to study the Eldorian scroll fragment. The next day, Lena arrived in Diatoren through its tiny neighbor. She then immediately assigned Task Force Rose to investigate the situation inside the king's residence. Lena had already completed her earlier mission. She should be receiving a medal from Balthazar. But now, Diatoren was in danger. She was in no mood to think about her owed accolades. Instead, she should be helping Caspian figure out what had happened to Balthazar. Jerry had already anticipated people looking into this state of affairs, so he disconnected all the cameras within the king's residence. He had already made plans so he wouldn't make such a rookie mistake. With no camera footage, Task Force Rose couldn't find any incriminating evidence. So, they had to take a different path of action. Jerry didn't continue to sit around and twiddle his thumbs either. He began to distance Caspian supporters from him. Now that Balthazar was under his control, Jerry was the one making the major decisions instead. And so, he had the armored soldiers restationed in Tigra. Since this was an order from Balthazar himself, the armored soldiers didn't dare to disobey. Sylvia already knew Jerry's rationale, but she had no choice but to follow her orders. One by one, everyone that Caspian had trained was stationed elsewhere. And now, Caspian was all alone. The transfer of Caspian's famed armored soldiers led to an uproar. Vedesia, Astronia, and Estria began making plans once they caught wind of this news. With Caspian's removal and the armored soldiers moved to Tigra, now was the perfect chance to make a move. However, they didn't dare to act rashly, in case this was a ploy by Diatoren. So, they decided to stand back and observe for a while longer. No one could figure out why Balthazar would dismiss the god Caspian so suddenly. This was just weakening the nation's defenses. And with how sudden this development was, none of the other countries dared to make a move yet. Jerry had Balthazar give the order to transfer the armored soldiers so that he could further weaken Caspian. They could only take down Caspian when he had no one to turn to. Kelvin was also currently busy with getting in touch with Skyark Palace. He had contacted them to form his own troops of soldiers. Zane had also created his own intelligence department. He then sent out some Skyark Palace members to gather information. Anyone who dared to question the Andrews family would then be punished. The rest of the Diaturanian officials didn't dare to offend the Andrewses. They knew that the Andrews family was now the king's darling. In fact, many officials began to curry favor with them. Caspian spent the next 2 days studying the Eldorian scroll fragment he had. The Stuarts initially wanted to attack Caspian, but they didn't dare to make their way to Riverside Villa. All they did was hold on to their anger. Tom and Arya made a full recovery with Avon treating them. They could now fully return to their duties. That night, Lena called Caspian. "Lord Caspian, Task Force Rose has discovered something," Lena stated. "Speak," Caspian said, worked up by this piece of news. "It took us a few days of investigations, but we found out that many people in black entered the king's residence the night before he called you back to Dord City. I already knew about that. His Majesty has also said that a group of assassins had ambushed him. Jerry mentioned that Lyndon's men had killed them all," Caspian said. "I think there's more to it. The ones who were killed were most likely His Majesty's own guards," Lena said. Caspian's expression turned stiff. "How do you know? Do you have proof?" he asked. "Not yet, for now. But it seems that His Majesty's current guards are all new faces, and they seem different from the average person. Clearly, they're assassins in disguise," Lena declared. Caspian was shocked by this piece of news. He had thought this a possibility, but there hadn't been any proof until now. It seemed that Balthazar was truly in a den of wolves now. Since these assassins have successfully infiltrated His Majesty's residence, why didn't they do anything to him? Caspian asked. "I'm guessing that they're holding His Majesty hostage. They can then do anything they want this way," Lena said. "Have you found out who's behind all this?" Caspian asked anxiously. This was the key thing he wanted to know. "If my guess is right, then it's the Andrewses. They benefit the most from this arrangement. Jerry, Kelvin, and Zane have all climbed to high positions. With that in mind, it makes sense that they're the masterminds," Lena said.